We get back out onto the highway after the storm passed and start to drive again. Well, the lead vehicle at the time, he's hustling, right, doing 60, 70 miles an hour or something like that, and doesn't see a bomb crater in the road out ahead of him. And basically hits the brakes and causes this chain reaction for the entire convoy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when he does that, some of the other drivers, again, it's a long drive. I think, maybe some guys weren't paying attention. It caused a chain reaction, causes one of the LMTVs, which is a large troop carrier right in front of me, to then slam its brakes on and go sliding on the highway. And basically the vehicle did a 180, if you can imagine that. And the vehicle hits the dirt and then it flips about 3 or 4 times. And this is full of guys in the back. And I just remember I was driving our Humvee at the time. I had our small LURS team with us. My team lead at the time, which is a guy named Adrian Elizalde, who unfortunately later on would go to Special Forces and get killed in Iraq. But he and I were together, and good guys in the back. One of our guys was a former Ranger Regiment guy, and then he had worked on an ambulance as a paramedic. When he got out of the Army, when 9/11 happened, he came back in.
Got it.
And so, highly trained first responder, right? And so obviously he was our team medic, right? So, and a couple of my young guys back there with us, and we see this vehicle slide off the road, flip. Guys are flying, equipment's flying, and at that moment, I was like, this is going to be bad, like really bad. So I basically am driving the Humvee and kind of following the wreckage, making sure that I don't run anybody over or anything else, bring the vehicle to a stop, a stop. And we immediately jump out of the vehicle and start to help dudes. There were, I think, 2 guys. There were 2 guys that were trapped underneath the vehicle, several guys with them. These guys were sitting towards the rear of the LMTV, and essentially they were folded in half underneath the vehicle. So myself, my team leader at the time, Adrian, we're digging underneath the back of the truck. There was a guy pinned under the back who had a broken pelvis. So, I mean, there were guys everywhere. I'm talking shattered femurs, broken backs. One guy had his chest cavity collapsed. Horrific, right?
Yeah, just totally worst case scenario for a convoy going to a chain of command ceremony.
Exactly.
And
catastrophic accident with a troop carrier, and now guys are either dead, wounded, all broken up. I mean, I remember guys crying for their moms, like really, really tough stuff, right? So all I could think about then was like help as many guys as you can.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting with the guy that was pinned under the back of the LMTV, and he actually gave me his wedding ring at the time. He was married and was like, hey man, if I don't make it, like, please make sure my wife gets this wedding ring, So like serious, life-changing type experiences.
Yeah.
And that one for me was, I think, probably one that makes me, sad when I think about that, because, 3 guys ended up dying out of that. And it was like, for what, man? You know what I mean? It was almost like, had we been in a gunfight, I could
kind of accept it a little bit.
Yeah, but the formality of the military and some of the silliness that the regular military still wanted to do, it just didn't sit well with me. And I can remember after that kind of making a decision. And I had some other experiences in that deployment where we did work with special operations and we were attached with them. And I was like, when I get back, that's what I'm doing. Like 110%. And so that's what I did.
Yeah. And not only like stopping the vehicle, getting out, and like if you were to hear like on Highway 1, right? And right next to the water, like if you saw a multi-vehicle collision and you pull over to the shoulder and you get out and you can go run over to the people and be like, hey, are you okay? Blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
Like you still have to worry about insurgents in the area, right?
Exactly.
You still have to worry about IEDs.
Yeah.
So there's like so much more going on to that. And then completely get where you're at from my point of view of like, hey, we have this big change of command ceremony. We're going to fluff it up, blah, blah, blah. But we want some representation from you guys. So we need you guys here at this time. And you're like, for what?
Yeah, exactly.
We lost so many of these guys. So The soldier that gave you the ring that was pinned, did he make it or
He
not?
did.
He did.
Yeah. So his name was John Eisenberg. He ended up going to 7th Special Forces Group, where he would later, I believe he retired out of there. I lost contact with him. But yeah, he ended up having a pretty catastrophic injury. So he's medevaced all the way back home. Broken pelvis, and ended up recovering from that and actually coming back.
That's fucking impressive.
Yeah, exactly.
That alone.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I was very fortunate to have served in F Company 51st with a lot of really great guys. A lot of guys would leave that company and go on and be really impactful guys in their own right in special operations after that. So it was a really great group of guys to serve with, and I was really proud of that. One of the other kind of small parts of that whole, mass casualty thing was because that storm had just come through, the helicopters weren't flying to medevac. So, there were guys that, that we sat on for hours, at a casualty collection point, like you do in the military when something big and bad happens, you know what I mean? Like there's still an organized process to everything where you're essentially, you're looking at guys evaluating their injuries, who has to be medevac first, right? And you're going
for your
down
line,
exactly
who's priority, who's urgent, who's
exactly. And there was one guy, 2 of the guys were dead right away. And I remember helping carry one of those guys and putting a poncho over him and carrying him out to a casualty collection point. And then there was another guy, Specialist Gleason, who was still alive. And unfortunately, because, we couldn't get a medevac to get him to a higher level of care, he ended up passing later on. We did get him on a bird eventually. And he went to, back to basically an emergency, military hospital type of deal. A cache is what it's called. And I remember getting the call that night. I was sitting with the guys that I was on my team with on that long range surveillance team, and I remember the guy Mike Kirby, who was the medic on my team, and we were sitting there next to each other. And we got the call over SATCOM that Gleason didn't make it. And he was the guy that everybody was, to include Mike, were working on to try to save. And, of course, we got the call that night. And I just remember Mike, breaking down. And we were all emotional. You know what I mean? It hurts to lose guys that you care about. And it was tough to see all that. So no doubt that was an impactful. Again, this is my first combat deployment and, multiple gunfights but hey, that's, essentially what you signed up for. And I think my other realization in it was, is that, yeah, man, bad things happen, and bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen in general. And, you just do the best you can to manage the situation at the time and make sure that you do the best you can to take care of people.